Youth Uprising, Oakland Community Organizations, SEIU 10 to 1, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights for the San Francisco Bay Area, Go Public Schools, Youth Together, Education Trust West. We've all come together to invite this study, to invite NCTQ to come to Oakland. This coalition represents hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of educators and families in this city. And on behalf of me and my team at Go, I just want to publicly thank again our partners for being in this work with us. These are complicated, sometimes controversial issues, and the conversation is richer and better, and our work is strengthened by having such a rich diversity of perspectives at the table with us. So I want to invite a round of applause for the coalition for staying in this together. Ultimately, part of what brought us together is our Superintendent's Challenge. For those of you if you've heard Tony Smith speak, one of the things that he often says is that the district is necessary but not sufficient. That ultimately we need an Oakland that takes responsibility for outcomes for kids in this city. And so a big part of this conversation comes from our value that we have to start to do more as parents, as educators, to understand the system and come to tables like this to shape the path forward and make it together. So what is our vision? Each and every child in Oakland has consistent access to effective teaching. And then we have an equity clause, and our most high-need students have equitable access to our most highly effective teaching. This is the vision. We as a coalition, we agree on a few things, and this is one thing that we are all clear about. And it basically, on some level, it bears out what we know from research and from what we know as parents and educators, that teachers and the work of teaching is the most important thing, that interaction between teachers and students for student outcomes and student learning in school. So a few things that we've agreed on as a coalition so far as we're working to create this space. One, that we must take collective responsibility for student learning. That ultimately this is about student achievement and opportunities for kids. Two, that Oakland teachers deserve our community's support. As we are at tables with teachers almost without exception say we need more time to collaborate, we want meaningful feedback from our peers, from our principals to improve our practice, and ultimately there is more that we can do as Oakland to support our teachers who are working very hard, often against very tough odds. Three, that Oakland needs a culturally competent teaching force that reflects the diversity within the community. As we have worked with parents and students across the city, and by the way, parents, this room, how many folks are parents tonight? Who has kids in Oakland Public Schools? That's awesome. How about a round of applause for our parents? As we meet with parents across the city, it's so clear that African American, Latino, Asian American parents want their teachers, their kids in rooms with grown-ups who reflect their linguistic, their cultural backgrounds. So that's a big piece of how this work has to move forward in Oakland. Next, that our efforts should work with teachers' unions and not undermine their ability to collectively bargain. As we said, there's a lot of information. These ideas are often very controversial in different contexts, and reasonable people can disagree about the path forward. And one thing that we're clear about as a coalition is that we invite the teachers union and leadership and teachers to be in this with us. They're essential to moving this forward. Finally, that effective teaching includes evidence of both what teachers do and what students learn, and not just test scores. So when we're thinking about this work over time, we have to get better understanding good practice on one hand, and be sure that we're also looking at what kids learn. And we hear from stakeholders across the system that test scores are going to be insufficient in Oakland to talk about, to describe what we care about in terms of student learning. And then lastly, and I think I've already covered this, that parents, students, educators, and community voices are essential for shaping this work going forward. And so again, thank you our collective work tonight. And ultimately, the NCTQ's study and findings and recommendations are for us to make sense of and figure out our path forward, where we want to start and how to move forward together. One last note as we kind of, as I transition to introduce the National Council on Teacher Quality. These spaces are a work in progress for us as a coalition. Creating spaces where parents and educators, district leaders can work together, and everyone has relevant experiences to share and bring to the table, and everybody's expertise is valued as parents, as teachers in the system. It's a work in progress, and the biggest norm that we're inviting and challenging and hoping for all of us is just respectful communication, and that we share the air and we work together and stay at these tables together. So how did we get here as a coalition? Well, a couple of years ago, many of the folks in this room were actually over in the gym, just on this campus. OCO, the community organizations, had mobilized hundreds of people to be there because over 500 of our teachers were laid off that year because of budget cuts, and some of you got those layoffs. So we had some schools where 16 out of 16 teachers got a notice of potential layoff. And parents and educators said, there's something about this that just this doesn't feel like it's the right thing for kids, right? And so we started to ask questions: how does this system work? What drives the different decisions that board members or superintendents feel like they need to make, right? So ultimately, as we started to do research meetings, some parents and teachers went to talk to Brigitte, we went to talk to Kyla, we went to talk to Lisa Spielman down at OUSD. Gosh, the biggest answer we came up with in the short term was, this is really complicated. So we reached out, we found the National Council on Teacher Quality. We saw that they had been doing studies of district policies and practice around teaching. I think at that point they'd done like 7 or 8 cities before us. Found out that they did this kind of work, and we invited them to come to Oakland to help us understand the system, help us access information about how our system was working, and provide a third-party perspective for all of us on what are we doing well and what are some areas for improvement. That ultimately, it's going to be up to us to see this move forward. So with that context, I want to introduce you to Kate Walsh, the president of the National Council on Teacher Quality, and Nancy Waimak, the lead researcher on the study from the National Council on Teacher Quality. So